So we are back with Chapter 8 of The Sword in the Stone by T.H. White. The wart has been transformed into a Merlin hawk and has been left in the mews overnight. He just had Cully, the hawk that he saved at the beginning of the story, yell at him, and we continue from there. "Colonel," said the Peregrine coldly, "not before the younger officers." "I beg your pardon, ma'am," said the poor Colonel at once. "It's something that gets into my head, you know. Some deep damnation." There was silence again, formal, terrible, and calm. "Who is the new officer?" inquired the first fierce and beautiful voice. Nobody answered. "Speak for yourself, sir," commanded the Peregrine, looking straight before her, as if she were talking in her sleep. They could not see him through their hoods. "Please," began the wart, "I am a Merlin." And he stopped, scared in the stillness. Balin, who was one of the real Merlins standing beside him, leaned over and whispered quite keenly in his ear, "Don't be afraid. Call her madam." "I am a Merlin, madam, and it please you." "A Merlin! That is good. And what branch of the Merlins do you stoop from?" The wart did not know in the least what branch he stooped from, but he dared not be found out now in his lie. "Madam," said the wart, "I am one of the Merlins of the forest Sauvage." There was silence at this again, the silver silence which he had begun to dread. "There are the Yorkshire Merlins," said the honorary colonel in her slow voice at last, "and the Welsh Merlins, and the MacMerlins of the north. There are the Salisbury ones, and several from the neighbourhood of Exmoor. I don't think I have ever heard of any family in the forest Sauvage." "It would be a cadet branch, madam," said Balin, "I dare say." "Bless him," thought the wart. "I shall catch him a special sparrow tomorrow, and give it to him behind Hobbs' back. That will be the solution. That will be the solution, Captain Balin, no doubt." The silence fell again. At last the Peregrine rang her bell. She said, "We will proceed with the Catechism prior to swearing him in." The wart heard the spar-hawk on his left, giving several nervous coughs at this, but the Peregrine paid no attention. "Merlin of the forest Sauvage," said the Peregrine, "what is a beast of the foot?" "A beast of the foot? A beast of the foot," replied the wart, blessing his stars that Sir Ector had chosen to give him a first-rate education, "is a horse, or a hound, or a hawk." "Why are these called beasts of the foot?" "Because these beasts depend upon the power of their feet, so that by law any damage to the feet of a hawk, hound, or horse is reckoned to be damage to its life. A lamed horse is a murdered horse." "Good," said the Peregrine. "What are your most important members?" "My wings," said the wart, after a moment, guessing because he did not know. At this there was a simultaneous tintabulation of all the bells as each graven image lowered its raised foot in distress. They stood up on both feet now, disturbed. "Your what?" cried the Peregrine sharply. "He said his damned wings," said Colonel Cully from his private enclosure, "and damned be he who first cries hold. Enough!" "But even a thrush has wings," cried the humble kestrel, speaking for the first time in his sharp-beaked alarm. "Think," whispered Balin under his breath. The wart thought feverishly. A thrush had wings. Tail, eyes, legs, apparently everything. "My talons." "That will do," said the Peregrine kindly, after one of her dreadful pauses. "The answer ought to be feet, just as it is to all the other questions, but talons will do." All the hawks, and of course we are using the term loosely, for some were hawks and some were falcons, raised their belled feet again and sat at ease. "What is the first law of the foot?" "Think," said friendly little Balin behind his false primary. The wart thought and thought. "Never let go," he said. "Last question," said the Peregrine. "How would you, as a Merlin, kill a pigeon bigger than yourself?" Wart was lucky in this one, for he had heard Hob giving a description of how Balin did it one afternoon, and he answered warily, "I should strangle her with my foot." Good, said the peregrine. Bravo, called all the others, raising their feathers. 90%, said the sparhawk after a quick sum. That is, if you give him half for the talons. This devil damn me black. Colonel, please, little Balin whispered to Ward. Colonel Cully is not quite right in his wits. It is his liver, we believe, but the kestrel says it is the constant strain of living up to her ladyship's standard. He says that her ladyship spoke to him from her full rank once, cavalry to infantry, you know, and that he just closed his eyes and got the vertigo. He has never been the same since. Captain Balin, said the peregrine, it is rude to whisper. We will proceed to swear in the new officer. Now, Padre, if you please. The poor sparhawk, who had been getting more and more nervous for some time, blushed deeply and began faltering out a complicated oath about varvels, jesses, and hoods. With this varvel, the wart heard, I thee endow, love, honour, and obey, till jest do us part. But before the padre had got to the end of it, he broke down altogether and sobbed out, Oh, please, your ladyship, I beg your pardon, but I've forgotten to keep any tirings. Tirings are bones and things, explained Balin. And of course, you have to swear on bones. Forgotten to keep any tirings? But it is your duty to keep tirings. I know. What have you done with them? The sparhawk's voice broke at the enormity of the confession. I ate 'em, wept the unfortunate priest. Nobody said anything. The dereliction of duty was too terrible for mere words. All stood on 2 feet and turned their blind heads toward the culprit. Not a word of reproach was spoken. Only during an utter silence of 5 minutes they could hear the incontinent priest snivelling and hiccuping to himself. Well, said the peregrine at last, the initiation will be put off till tomorrow. If you'll excuse me, madam, said Balin, perhaps we can manage the ordeal part of it tonight. I believe the candidate is loose. For I did not hear him being tied up. At the mention of an ordeal, the wart trembled within himself and privately determined that Balin should not have one feather of Balin's sparrow the next day. Thank you, Captain Balin. I was reflecting upon that subject myself. Balin shut up. Are you loose, candidate? Oh, madam, yes, I am, if you please, but I don't think I want an ordeal. The ordeal is customary. Let me see, continued the honorary colonel reflectively. What was the last ordeal we had? Can you remember, Captain Balin? My ordeal, ma'am, said the friendly Merlin, was to hang by my jesses during the 3rd watch. If he's loose, he can't do that. You could strike him yourself, ma'am, said the kestrel, judiciously, you know. Send him over to stand by Colonel Cully while we ring thrice, said the other Merlin. Oh, no, cried the crazy colonel in an agony out of his remoter darkness. Oh, no, your ladyship, I beg of you not to do that. I am such a damned villain, your ladyship, that I don't answer for the consequences. Spare the poor boy, your ladyship, and lead us not into temptation. Colonel, control yourself. That ordeal will do very well. Oh, madam, I was warned not to stand by Colonel Cully. Warned? And by whom? The poor wart realized that now he must choose between confessing himself a human and learning no more of their secrets, or going through with his ordeal to earn his education. He did not want to be a coward. I will stand by the colonel, madam, he said immediately, noticing that his voice sounded insulting. The peregrine falcon paid no attention to the tone. It is well, she said, but first we must have the hymn. Now, Padre, if you haven't eaten your hymns as well as your tirings, will you be so kind as to lead us in ancient but not modern number 23, the Ordeal Hymn? And you, Mr. Key, she added to the kestrel, you had better keep quiet, for you are always too high. The hawk stood still in the moonlight, while the sparhawk counted 1, 2, 3, Then all those curved or toothed beaks opened in their hoods in a bizarre unison, and this is what they fiercely chanted. Life is blood, shed and offered. The eagle's eye can face this dree. To beasts of chase the lie is proffered. Timor mortis conturbat me. The beast of foot sings hold fast only, for flesh is bruckle and foot is slee. Strength to the strong, and lordly and lonely, timor mortis exultant me. Shame to the slothful and woe to the weak one, death to the dreadful who turn to flee, blood to the tearing, the taloned, the beaked one, timor mortis is me. Very good, said the peregrine. Captain Ballon, I think you were a little off on the top C. Now, candidate, you will go over and stand next to Colonel Cully's enclosure, while we ring our bells thrice. On the third ring you may move as quickly as you like. Very good, madam, said the ward, quite fearless with resentment. He flipped his wings and was sitting on the extreme end of the screen perch next to Cully's enclosure of strong netting. Boy! Boy! Cried the colonel in an unearthly voice. Don't come near me. Don't come near me. Tempt me not the foul. Tempt not the foul fiend in his damnation. I don't fear you, sir, said the ward. Don't vex yourself, for no harm will come to either of us. No harm, quotha. Ah! Go, before it is too late. I feel eternal longings in me. Never fear, sir. They have only got to ring 3 times. At this, all the knights lowered their raised legs and gave them a solemn shake. The first sweet persuasive tinkling filled the room. Madam! Madam! Cried the colonel in torture. Have pity on a damned man of blood. Ring out the old, ring in the new. I can't hold off much longer. Be brave, sir, said the wart softly. Be brave, sir. Why, but 2 nights since, one met the Duke about midnight in the lane behind the St. Mark's Church, with the leg of a man upon his shoulder, and he howled fearfully. It's nothing, said the wart. Nothing. Said he was a wolf. Only difference was a wolf's skin was hairy on the outside, his on the inside. Rip up my flesh and try off for quietness with a bare bodkin. The bells rang for a second time. The wart's heart was thumping heavily and pleading for the third release, but now the colonel was sliding toward him along the perch. Stamp, stamp he went, striking the wood he trod on with a convulsive grip at each pace. His poor, mad, brooding eyes glared in the moonlight, shone against the persecuted darkness of his scowling brow. There was nothing cruel about him, no ignoble passion. He was terrified of the wart, not triumphing, as he must slay. If it were done, when 'tis done, whispered the colonel, then 'twere it well. It were done quickly. Who would have thought the young man had so much blood in him? Colonel, said the wart, but held himself there. Boy, cried the colonel, speak, stop me, mercy. There is a cat behind you, said the wart calmly, or a pine marten. Look. The colonel turned, swift as a wasp's sting, and menaced into the gloom. There was nothing. He swung his wild eyes again upon the wart, guessing at the trick. Then in the cold voice of an adder, The bell invites me, he hissed for the last time. Hear it not, Merlin, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. The third bells were indeed ringing as he spoke, and Honor was allowed to move. The ordeal was over, and the wart might fly, but as he flew, quicker than any movement or flight in the world, the terrible sickles that shot out from the colonel's plated legs, not flashed out, for they moved too quick for sight, and with a thump, with a clutch, with an apprehension like being arrested by a big policeman, the great scimitars had fixed themselves on his retreating thumb. And that is where we will pause.